Welcome, ladies. Thank you for joining She Matters on this Saturday evening. Really appreciate you guys taking the time to spend with us. I'm going to kick things off. Hi, I'm Marguerite Pierce. I'm one of the co-founders of She Matters. I'm just going to go through just some housekeeping items and then we'll jump right in. So first off, completely up to your discretion whether or not you want to have your camera on. I will just say that this is a space brought to us by Black women for Black women. So if for whatever chance you're not a Black woman and you're here in support of Black women, then I would ask you to keep your camera off and to yield the floor to the Black women participants, because this space is for us and by us. The subject matter that we're going to be talking about today: depression, anxiety, postpartum, abortion. These things can be very triggering depending on our own experiences. So in the email that was sent out with the Zoom information, I included a crisis text line, and I'm going to pop it in the chat right now. So if you're triggered or overwhelmed by any of the information that's shared here today, I ask that you text home to 741-741. I'm putting that in the chat right now. Also, everybody is muted upon entry. We will have time for questions and answers with Jade and Brittany. For just efficiency purposes, it's just best to type your question in the chat, and then I'll be able to read out all the questions and be able to direct them to either Jade or Brittany, so that it just flows easier and we don't get into, people talking over one another. And the final thing is that, again, to keep things moving smoothly, please refrain from, advertising or marketing any products or services. This is not the opportunity for that. So, just if you have a comment or a question, just leave it to that. And I think I've covered it all. So with that being said, I'm going to kick it over to my best friend and the CEO of She Matters, Jade Kearney.
Thank you so much, Margie. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy that all of you guys are here. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. So welcome, 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 welcome. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about who we are, Marge and I, what She Matters is, and we'll go from there. So She Matters is an online, offline platform for Black women who experience anxiety and or depression. And we provide community, culturally competent resources, and culturally competent therapists and wellness professionals. Um, I founded She Matters because three and a half years ago, after having my daughter, I suffered from postpartum anxiety OCD. At the time, I had no idea what that was. Like, what is postpartum anxiety OCD, right? Now I can tell you and give you the medical verbiage behind that. But when I was going through it, what it felt like was really, really negative ideas about things that I may do to my daughter. I was afraid to walk past the kitchen because I was afraid to be around knives. I was afraid to go near the window because I thought, what if I stab her? Or what if I throw her out the window? And what was so debilitating was I didn't feel like that, right? I didn't feel like I wanted to be away from her. I didn't feel like I wanted to harm her. So these ideas were coming out of nowhere, and it was excruciating. It was painful. That's the best way I could describe that. I didn't have support from my family. I did not. I went to a couple relatives and said I was having a hard time. Some people told me to pray. Some people said, we're Black. We don't have time for that. Like, we don't have time for postpartum anxiety or postpartum depression. Like, you'll be fine. I even had some relatives say, oh, yeah, I know what that's like. You just got to push through it. I wasn't accepting of that. I didn't want to push through anything. I didn't feel like I needed to suffer for God knows how long because I'm a Black woman. So I started to look for resources. I Googled things, Black women postpartum. I Googled like negative ideas about your daughter or negative ideas about your child. And I figured out that what I was experiencing was something called intrusive thoughts. And intrusive thoughts are like when you have these random thoughts that you would never act on, but they're there. It's like anxiety's cousin. It's under the umbrella of anxiety, right? And so I remember taking the train and Marge said she's my best friend. We're best friends. And I was scared to get on the train. I was scared of the tracks. Like, what if I jump on the tracks? Like, I was just in this space of fear. Um, and so I found these like all of these mom groups, these postpartum groups, and they were all white women. When I'm telling you, there was no group that was like five Black women. It was all Black women. They were sharing their stories and they were talking about medications they were on. They were talking about how their family was supportive. And I said, well, that's not happening for us. And so I started to feel ashamed, right? I started to have a lot of shame around, am I the only person going through this? Am I the only person in my family who's been through this? And I'll never forget. And at some point, I have to find the writer of this BuzzFeed article and have a conversation, because whether I'm pitching for our company or whether I'm doing an event, I always talk about the BuzzFeed article that had 10 stories of Black women who had postpartum anxiety and postpartum depression. And what I remember when I read the article was that their stories were so similar to mine, as far as no family support around their postpartum anxiety, OCD, or no, they didn't share with their friends about what they were experiencing. Um, or they were, some women hadn't taken showers for weeks, and it was just a plethora of different angles of postpartum. They all got better at the end. That's what I that was the thing that stuck out to me most, was I'm reading this article about all these women who were dealing with what I'm dealing with right now. And I'll never forget, I was a teacher in Newark, New Jersey, and I found it and I said, oh my God, they're all better. And I thought to myself, well, I'm going to get better. I'm not going to let this defeat me. I don't care what the status quo is and who's not taking care of who, and or who or how we manage this culturally. I'm going to step out on faith and work on this myself. Um, and I said, while I'm working on it, I want to help other Black women who may be dealing with this as well. So I started to go to therapy. I had two therapists. I had a cognitive behavioral therapist, and that's the therapist that kind of helps you manage whatever kind of symptoms or you may have from your anxiety. So if you're somebody who has intrusive thoughts like I had, or hypochondria, you manage those symptoms in that moment. And that was helpful to me for my behaviors, right? But I also had a therapist to talk about my past and my family issues that helped me understand why I had this kind of anxiety in the first place. And to be honest, I was already struggling with anxiety before I had my daughter. My daughter was the catalyst that helped me to my healing. I always say that, like, without her, I might still be just struggling through my anxiety. So I'm going to therapy. I'm going to my two different therapists. I'm working with my doctors. I'm going to acupuncture. And I told my therapist, if after a year I don't feel like myself, I'm going to consider medication. I remember on her first birthday, I looked at my husband and I said, I'm going to talk to a psychiatrist because I'm not there yet. I'm not there yet. I was better, but I wasn't there yet. I still wasn't sleeping the way I should. And here we are, 12 months postpartum. Things are supposed to be changing. You're kind of getting out of that, space of not being able to sleep. And I found a psychiatrist that worked for me. One of my best friends, and she joins us a lot. Her name is Dr. Colette Shefton, Dr. Colette Shefton Boykin, out of Yale. And I spoke to her about what I was struggling with, and she said, why do you feel like you have to suffer? Why are you doing this to yourself? You don't have to suffer. And I remember driving in Soho in New York, and I kept missing where I was going because I was crying and I was on the phone and I was saying, well, I don't want to get on medication because I don't want to feel like something's controlling me. I don't want to not be like myself. I don't want to be a bad mom. And she said, well, do you feel like you're a great mom if you're not taking care of yourself right now? Do you feel like yourself right now? Are you happy right now? why do you want to struggle? And so she said, here are a couple medications I think may work for you. So I always like to tell people, find someone you can talk to that you trust, find a psychiatrist that you trust, or a OBGYN that you trust, and have that conversation about what you're dealing with. Because I believe that I got on a medication that worked for me. I found a great psychiatrist. I got on a medication called Luvox, and it's for obsessive compulsive disorder. So intrusive thoughts are obsessive compulsive disorder. And it didn't happen overnight, but a year later, I was feeling great. Like, I mean, I was finishing my master's degree. My daughter was 2 years old. We had moved back to the city. Things were just going really well for me mentally. Like, I was able to complete things. And for the first time, I felt like I didn't have this weight, right? This weight on my shoulders, this weight on my chest. I was able to think things through. Um, turn around to the pandemic, right? We're going into the pandemic, and I lost my grandfather in the pandemic, who was very near and dear to my heart. I lost my uncle in the pandemic, and all of these things were happening. I was graduating from NYU. The graduation was virtual. I lost two very upstanding men in my life because I don't really have a relationship with my father. These men were like my father. So I'm going through all of this stuff, and I'm like, I'm finally graduating from NYU. My daughter is out of diapers. I'm losing weight. Like, I was just feeling like this is the time I'm gonna heal from the deaths from the pandemic. And then I found out I was pregnant. And I will never forget that moment, because I called Marguerite and I said, Marge, I'm pregnant. And it was just like, I was so mortified. I was mortified. Like, today I can say it without crying, but a couple months ago I wouldn't have been able to say that without crying, because I did not want to have another child. I said, I just got out of this postpartum thing. Like, I'm just feeling better. Like, am I going to have to go through that again? Is this going to happen again? Am I going to be anxious? Am I going to be stressed? Am I going to have postpartum depression where I don't want to be near the baby? I don't know what's going to happen. Like, I've worked so hard to get here, and I felt like everything was falling apart. I also had something called hyperemesis, and it's where you throw up constantly in your pregnancy. And with my first daughter, who's now 3.5, I had it really, really bad. I actually lost 16 pounds. With this baby, I lost 21 pounds. I remember at 3 months pregnant, I was throwing up. I called Marge on the phone and I said, Marge, I can't do this. I can't. And I will be 100% honest. I thought, and I think my husband felt that, because he came in the bathroom at one point and I said, I can't do this. And he said, man, like, you don't want to have the baby? And I said, no, I'm going to have the baby. But I will tell you, there were nights, there were days where I really considered, like, I don't want to have the baby. I want to have an abortion. And that's hard to say, because I'm so happy that I have my daughter now. I'm so happy that she's here. But when I was going through it, I was like, I'm so sick. I'm so sick. I'm so miserable. I'm healing. I'm mourning. All of these things are happening, and this is not what I feel like should be happening right now. And I wasn't even in tune with my body, because I was so sick, and mentally I was depressed. And I can say this was the first time that I didn't feel like the mental challenges I was having were anxiety. They were depression. And I had conversations with my therapist, and he said, I want you to get out of this. I want you to come out of this. And I was like, I can't, because every time I tried to sit up, I threw up. And I was angry. I was angry. I don't know if any of you have ever experienced that. I was angry. Why is this happening? We're in a pandemic. Why can't I just have a good pregnancy? Why can't I just why can't I just hold the baby and not throw up everything and feel like I'm dying every single day? I had guilt from not being able to be the type of mom that I want to be to my daughter, who is now 3. I said, all of this is taking everything away from me, and I want an abortion. And so what made me want to have this conversation was when I finally turned around and felt like, oh my God, I heard her heartbeat. I think that's a moment for all of us, right? I heard her heartbeat and I was like, "Oh my god, that's my baby," right? You get that little like, oh man, like she's really there." When I started to feel that connection with her and I started to feel a connection with my husband in terms of like he was so happy and so emotional about this pregnancy, and I was like, this is really bringing us together. And I said, okay, like now I know why this is happening. Then I started to feel guilty. I started to feel guilty about the thoughts that I had. I started to feel ashamed about the thoughts that I had, because children are a blessing, right? Especially in our culture religiously, the children are a blessing. Why would you get an abortion? Why would you do that? Why would you even think that? We're not even allowed to think about possibilities when we're having challenges, right? That's how I felt. And so I started to have this enormous guilt. And I remember saying, if I feel like this, I'm sure there are other women who feel like this. Like there have to be other women who had stressful pregnancies, who experienced postpartum, and they're avoiding having another baby. Or they got pregnant on accident like me and they don't want to go down that same path again. There has to be someone who's also suffering in silence right now, who feels guilty that they even had thoughts of not having a baby. And she's not on this call because I'm 6 weeks postpartum, everybody. And I really didn't get the message to her soon enough. But I was on Facebook and I saw a friend of mine from years ago who mentioned she thought about not having her twins because she already had 3 kids and didn't know if she can do it. And I thought her transparency was refreshing. I thought that she was reclaiming her voice, that she was standing up for herself, but she was also giving a breath of fresh air to other Black women who have thought about or who did not want to have a pregnancy and either went through with not having the pregnancy, which is totally your choice, or had the baby and needed to feel and needed to be released from that anxiety, needed to be released from that those stigmas and that shame. So I'm thinking about putting this together while I'm pregnant toward the end of my pregnancy. And I'm like, who would be a good facilitator? Who would be a great mental health practitioner to bring on this call to talk about getting out of your way? Because I realized at that time that I was in my own way. I couldn't even think straight. I had my daughter. Let me take it back a little bit. I'm 6 weeks postpartum. I had my daughter, and when she was in NICU, I thought, "Oh my goodness, this is happening because I had negative thoughts about my pregnancy. Maybe this is happening to me, right? Maybe this is what I get for feeling that way." And I had those thoughts of shame and guilt. And so when I thought about this, I thought about Brittany. She's a licensed therapist, and we've been on calls together on Fox Soul, and we just always had a great connection. And I loved how she spoke transparently about her process in dealing with her pain through her mother's death in her book, and what it really means for us to get out of our own way, particularly what it means for Black women to get out of our own way. So I'm so happy she's on this call with us, and she's going to talk to us about her experiences and getting out of your own way. So I want to introduce Brittany Johnson. Hey, Brittany.
Hey, thanks for having me and thanks for being transparent. Like it's refreshing to be in a space where we are allowed to do that because as Black women, we have to always be something, right? We have to be on and be perfect and all that stuff. So, yes, my book I wrote it during a period of grief. I needed a way to not deal with grief. I needed a way to deal with grief. So writing my book was that. I am a licensed mental health counselor in the state of Indiana. And so my process of being a therapist, my specialty is anxiety and then attachment related trauma. And so what you are describing is exactly the type of women that I typically work with. Those are women who either have just, anxiety from childhood trauma or generalized anxiety. But then also, there's a piece of my practice where I work with women who have had attachment related trauma. So these are women who oftentimes their moms didn't want them but did not have the freedom to have an abortion or didn't have support to carry their pregnancies healthy, or have support after when they were going through postpartum. And so as you were talking, I was thinking about those women that I have in my practice, but I was also thinking about myself. And just to share a little bit of my story, I had my first child at 19, and I grew up in a very religious family. We were at church more than we were at home, it seemed like. And I remember when I had my son, I was I was sick. I had the same thing you had with your daughter. So, but 19, almost 20 years ago, they didn't have the advances that they have now. So my course of treatment was be in the hospital or do home health, where they come and put you on IVs and teach you how to do all your fluids and everything through IV so that you can kind of get up and not just be laid down. So I had that whole process. So I had to get a PIC line put in while I'm pregnant. And I'm 18, had to leave college to go through this. So all of that in itself was traumatic. Then I have my baby prematurely. He's in the NICU. So I've got guilt from being a young mother, having this thing that no one explained to me as to why I was getting sick nonstop and staying dehydrated, like all of these things going. And I'll never forget one of the ladies at the church when I was explaining that I was just sad and I didn't know why I was sad and I was afraid I would hurt my baby, but I didn't have plans to do it. But like you, I walked past the kitchen. Oh my God, I'm nervous. Like what's in there? I was afraid to drive. I was afraid to sleep because what if I roll over? What if I don't wake up and all of these things. And I'll never forget one of the women at church said, well, that's what you get for having a baby before you were married. Those things don't happen to married women. So that stuck with me. So then, let's fast forward. My husband and I, who is my son's father, we end up getting married. 5 years later, right? So our son is 5, we're married, and I get pregnant again on accident. I was on birth control. My middle one, I don't know if you guys, I'm gonna be transparent here if that's cool. My middle son, he'll be 15 this year, but 15 birth control patch. And there was a recall, right? They were like, oh, we didn't realize that the patch went out with no medicine. That's him. That's how he got here. So so I found out I'm pregnant, right? And I'm married. So based on society, I'm supposed to be happy. I'm supposed to just be just full of excitement. I was in sheer panic. I cried. I didn't want to have another baby. I didn't want to go through postpartum again. I still had all this guilt from the women at church saying that my first pregnancy was the way it was because I was young and not married. So it was just a cluster. And so going into that pregnancy, I was like you, like I was in college. So I went back to school after leaving to have the first one. So I'm halfway done with college. We're newlyweds. We're trying to do this whole thing. And here comes another baby, right? So same thing, all this guilt, all this shame. So fast forward, as I think about getting out of your own way, guilt and shame will become your sabotage method, right? So once you start feeling guilty and then you have this shame component on top of it, the next thing that you start doing is you start sabotaging. You start saying things like, I don't even need to go try do that because who am I? I'm just this person who didn't even want to have their own baby. Every time you look at your kids, you're like, oh my God, I can't believe I thought about that. And so here comes guilt and shame. They come in and they make you sabotage yourself. And so the trick to starting to get out of your own way is to be honest with yourself and call it what it is. Yep, I had that thought. Yep, I did think about having an abortion. Yep, I did. I did have those feelings, but here I am today feeling differently, and I am allowed to change my mind. I am allowed to say, you know what? In that moment, I did not want to go through being sick. I didn't want to go through postpartum. I didn't want to go through the unknown. But here I am today. I've changed my mind. And let that start being a thing that you say to yourself that'll help you stop the guilt, stop the shame, and be able to not sabotage yourself because it's real. It is real.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much, Brittany. I want you to talk a little bit about your book and what does it really mean to get out of your own way?
Definitely. So my book is about self sabotage, but it's really more just about in general getting out of your own way. And I wrote it because, like I said, my mother had died. It was a very traumatic situation. We found out she was sick and she died 7 weeks later, on Christmas Eve, and Christmas was her favorite holiday. So all of that is going on. And a colleague of mine was like, you are always giving us education in our small groups and in other settings on anxiety. And that's what you are great at. Like, anxiety like the back of your hand, all of the different things that go into anxiety. So as I sat down to start writing a book about anxiety, I couldn't do it. Um, I just could not do it. And so as I started writing what I was experiencing, that was how I birthed my book. So I'm grieving and I don't want to write a book because my mother's not here to be able to encourage me or tell me, that she's proud. I also, know about anxiety, but I felt like an imposter. I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt like it wasn't perfect enough. So I ended up just writing the book about what I did to get over myself to write the book about anxiety. And so I ended up putting the book out about self sabotage and about getting out of your own way, because in reality, sabotage is the cousin or sister of anxiety. It just is. Because part of sabotage is like, I don't think I'm good enough. Anxiety does that to us, right? Oh, you can't do that. You need to be afraid. It's not perfect enough. Anxiety does that to us as well. It needs to be perfect before you step out, because people are going to judge everything about what you're doing. So for me, it went all the way back to, you were still the same girl that had that baby at 19. So how do you think you're going to go do something now because you didn't honor God, you didn't honor family, you had a baby at a wedlock at 19. So all of those things started showing up. Same thing with like imposter syndrome. You don't have enough skill, right? You don't have enough. You're not going to be a good enough mother because you had these thoughts about not wanting your child. Therefore, there's no way you will be qualified to even talk about it, do it, or anything. And so that's how, my book kind of relates to everything that we go through. It's not just about being a professional woman and being on that journey. We literally have to get out of our own way for almost anything. I had to do it the other day to go back to the gym, right? Even though I know the gym makes me feel good, I was stuck on, I can't do that. I need to be doing, and there was a list of all the things that I should be doing instead of going to the gym. All of the guilt, all the like everything was showing up.
I'm so appreciative of that and imposter syndrome, and I often have this conversation with Marguerite. So I really feel like my postpartum anxiety and depression was always linked to my childhood. Both of my parents are substance abusers.
Mm-hmm.
And I always had in the back of my mind, like, what kind of parent would I be if neither one of my parents chose their children over their lifestyle? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I used to think like that a lot.
Yeah.
Like, and when I had my daughter, I remembered holding her when she was 3 months. No, no, she wasn't 3 months. She was 2 weeks. And I
Mm-hmm.
said to my mom, because my mom had come from California to stay with us, I said, "How could you leave me?" And I felt like this flood of emotions that I never had. And I think our children really kind of tear us apart and build us up, right?
At the
I
same
never
time.
had, yes, I never had that attachment to children before. Like,
Mm-hmm.
what type of mom would I be? But when I had my own, I really didn't know if I would be able to fit the bill.
Yep.
And so I am so thankful for you talking about imposter syndrome. And it doesn't only happen when we're mothering or when we're becoming mothers or being parents. It happens all throughout. I had a conversation the other day about She Matters. She Matters is so important to both Marge and I, and helping women get out of their own way and helping women to, through, and past postpartum. And there are times when I'm anxious about being successful, right?
Oh yes.
There are times when we're anxious about taking that leap of faith and doing that next step. And what we always go back to is, we are here to help other Black women. We
Mm-hmm.
want other Black women to be successful. So hopefully our transparency, Marge's transparency, Brittany's transparency will create a pathway for you guys to get out of your own way.
Yeah.
So
And that shows up. So in my book, I talk about one of the reasons that we sabotage ourselves is fear of being alone. And when you level up to a certain point, especially if you surpass the highest person in your family, right? So if you are first gen college, graduate, you typically start feeling alone because no one else in your family has reached that. And they put a new level, they put pressure on you of like, well, you did this thing, so you're better. So then you get there, you get comfortable there because you make friends, you do things. So you have a new support system. Well, then you level up again, right? So each time you level up, there's a new layer of fear that shows up, and it is sabotage that says you're going to be alone and you don't want to be alone
Mm.
because it's lonely, this or that. So one of the things that I'll encourage everybody on the call listening is, if you find yourself there, realize somebody needs to hear your voice. Somebody needs to hear your story, no matter what level you're speaking at, what level you are on. Somebody is there and needs to hear it. And so, as you do that, Jay, because She Matters is important, I want you to think about that. There are women who may have way more experience than you, but you have something that they need. You have something to say that they need to hear. Your
Thank you.
transparency today even made me think about my own experience. And my kids are old, right? My baby is 11. But listening to you, it made me think about each time I had a child, there was a new level of guilt. I had to work through remembering I'm not a 19-year-old single mother anymore.
Mm.
Not to mention, when I had my child, my husband was on a full scholarship to college. So I came home and went to work while he stayed and finished school. So that was a whole other thing. Talk about being broke, right? And going through that. That adds in because I've got guilt that I've got to work 2 jobs and have this and leave my baby in some type of childcare. I've got guilt that I'm too tired to do something later. On top of this new drive of I need to be successful so I can spend time with this child. And each time you have a child, here comes another layer of that.
And I definitely understand that. I was saying before we got on the call, everyone, how I'm 6 weeks postpartum now, and I'm really tracking this journey because it's different than the one with my daughter. But the guilt that I have towards my 3-year-old, because she's no longer the only, and she's looking for mom, and she wants to play with mom, and she wants to be with mom. And I'm like this most of the day. I'm with both of them. I said that both of them in my arms are trying to manage that. And then I had a thought today, and I almost text Marge, but I knew we were going to get on the call, and Marge has her own family and child, right? So I thought, oh my God, I'm really enjoying waiting for my daughter to get out of gymnastics alone. I had vegan yogurt with some strawberries in it, and I was walking by the water downtown Manhattan, and I said, I am enjoying these 35 minutes of my alone time. And then my mind automatically went back to guilt. Well, how come you don't want to be at home with your baby? Or how come you're not watching Bean? That's my daughter's name. How come you're not watching Bean do cartwheels and gymnastics through the window since parents aren't allowed in? I had all of those thoughts, but for a moment, I just enjoyed myself. And what I want for everyone on the call, for all mothers on the call, whether you are, uh, peripartum or postpartum, is to take those minutes to enjoy yourself and just try to enjoy yourself. It's so hard for your mind not to loop back to the things that you think you should be doing. But I felt,
Let me
go ahead.
add. Sorry, I want to add. Enjoy it because it makes you a better mother.
Mm,
Because again, and Jade, you've heard me say this, you cannot pour from an empty tank. You can't mother from an empty tank. So if you get a moment to have alone time, that is your moment to recharge. That is your moment to give you that moment of clarity, that moment of peace, so that you can go be the mother you want to be. Because imagine trying to be exhausted and taking care of 2 babies.
yeah. And
That
I,
is no joke, right?
it's
Like,
no joke. I've
yeah.
experienced that in the last 6 weeks, and I thought, wow, this is a totally new vantage point of postpartum, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
it's a different type of postpartum anxiety and depression. It's different.
It
Like,
is.
I'm more familiar with it. It's like the cousin that you see sometimes that comes over, like, you know them, but now they staying at your house and you know them in a
Mm-hmm.
different way. That
Mm-hmm.
so I know what to look for, but new things are popping up all the time. Things with my body. My body is different this time, and I was just saying that to my husband. I'm like, I don't know this body.
Yeah.
I didn't have that experience with my first, but this time I felt like I didn't know my body. I'm worried about, will everything go back to place, and I almost felt like this is selfish. I have a healthy baby. Why am I thinking about my body? But no, my body matters to me,
Yes.
and I think we have to give ourselves permission. I love what you said earlier. You said something Marge, if you remember, Brittany, you said it was something like, you said like you can change your mind.
Yes, acknowledge where you are. And that is the way to kill anxiety and depression right in their like that's how you stop them right in their tracks. You go ahead and call it what it is. Yep. Yeah, I feel this way, but I can change my mind. I
Like,
literally can change it minute to minute if I want to, hour to hour. I can
but
change my mind.
it's like, I feel like, and correct me, anybody on this call, go ahead and put it in the chat, or Marge, I feel like we don't allow ourselves to change our minds.
We
Like
don't.
we think we're locked into it. We think, oh, if I said I'm gonna, I've changed my mind a lot in the last day. If I'm gonna cut all my hair off, I can't say that I'm not. Or I'm gonna send my daughter to this great school. I can't change my mind and say I'm gonna send her to a different one. Or I thought I didn't want to have a baby and now I do.
Yep. We are allowed to. We tell ourselves we're not, and oftentimes that is anxiety, depression, or the socially acceptable term sabotage. We tell ourselves that we aren't allowed to change our mind, but the reality is we are. And
Yes.
we have such a negative idea in society about being indecisive. And it's like I'm not being indecisive that I have new information and now want to make a different decision.
I love
Because that's
that. I'm not being
right.
indecisive. I have new information.
Yeah.
Give me the new information. Like, now I'm choosing to do something different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. I think,
That's what we need to do, right? That's what we need
yes,
to do.
I have outside information. I want to change my mind, but there are provocateurs. Let's talk about that a little bit. There are provocateurs in our families who will like attach you to your choice or your decision, right?
Oh
And you can't change your mind. You
yeah.
can't want to do this and then do that because you said you were going to do this. And what I've noticed a lot of the times, especially when it comes to children, the way you're raising your children, if you're going through postpartum and you say, my mom said something recently when she was here. I had a 9-pound baby basically at 37 weeks this time.
Whew.
I have a hernia. I have a pelvic floor relapse or something. Like,
Mhm.
my body really took a beating this time. And my mom said to me when I was 3 days postpartum, you need to get up and walk. No, I don't. No, I don't. The first time she told me that with my first daughter, I got up and walked
Oh my
because
goodness.
I didn't want to not meet the challenge of being the mother who could get up and walk, the strong Black woman who could get up and walk. I had different information this time. And so I said, no, I'm not going to get up and walk because I'm 3 days postpartum and I'm not ready to.
Can I tell you how much I bragged about being the mother that got up 2 hours after having C-sections and walked the hospital? Can Because that's what they said I had to do, and that was, you know, yeah. I
But
had all three of my children came through C-section. And after the first one, I had been in labor 20 something hours and my like he wasn't like even though he was premature, he was still not trying to fully make his debut. I had a situation when I was during that surgery where they cut me in a spot they wasn't supposed to cut me. But right after I had him, I was up walking because I was 19 and shouldn't have been having a baby anyway. And they told me, you better get back out there and get back into life immediately because how dare you have a baby without being married? So you don't get to complain. You don't get to have a day off. None of that.
well, for me, and I don't know,
So
like I
I'm
said,
right there with you. Yeah.
there are other folks on the call, and I'm sure we're all different ages. For me, my family was like, on my mother's side, you took so long to have a baby. I was 33.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you took so long to have a baby. You better hurry up and have another one.
Yeah.
Or how dare you have anxiety and depression? You didn't even have a baby till you was 33. I had 5 kids by the time I was 30 and I was fine. No, you weren't. How
Not at
about
all.
you weren't fine? How
Right.
about you were not? How about me acknowledging what I'm going through is raising something up in you don't like? How
Yeah.
about me advocating for myself is creating an uncomfortability with something in yourself? My aunt, who I am so close to, she has 5 kids. When I talked about my postpartum intrusive thoughts, she cried. She watched an interview and she cried and she said, I thought, and Marge, I talked about this on another call. She said, I thought it was the devil.
Yeah.
That's how much information we don't have. She said, I thought it was the devil and I just need to pray it away.
Yeah.
I mean, you can pray. Please pray to
Yes, but please
whoever.
talk to someone because you are suffering unjustly and
You are.
unnecessarily. Yes.
And I think that all goes back to when we think about abortion, suffering unjustly. Abortion is a choice. Thinking about abortion is a choice. Saying, I want to go get help after you have children for postpartum, that's a choice. Having a 5-year-old and saying, I never healed from when I had him the first time and I want to go because I feel like there's something wrong, that's all a choice. And don't let anybody steal your choices. How about that?
Yes.
There's so many choices. You ever go to a restaurant, there's a full menu.
Full menu.
Okay. There's a full menu. Life is the same way.
And
full menu.
Also, let's add in the piece that says Black people don't do. And I do air quotes a lot because anything that that is absurd has to get an air quote for me. So this idea that Black people don't do, like, that list is so long, and again, it's not fair because we are not monolithic people. Like, everybody wants something different. Everybody needs something different. Make your choice that's your choice, and don't make your permanent decisions off of a temporary emotion. Give yourself 5 minutes, 5 days, give yourself, you can make the number whatever you want it to be, but give yourself space before you make a decision. Because some decisions are permanent, right? Like, there are some decisions that once you do this, there's no go back. So before you make that kind of a decision, give yourself time to think about, is this a fleeting thought? Is this another intrusive thought that is showing up that, I need to let it pass its way through?
I love that. I love that. Some decisions are permanent, right?
Mhm.
I totally agree with you. There's not many of them are not, but some
Many
of
are
them
not.
are. Some of them are. And so I love that. I used to be a teacher, and so we would say, take a minute before you answer the question.
Yeah.
Right? Because everybody's raising their hand, right? But nobody, you don't win for coming up with the answer the fastest, right? Just take a minute. Just take a minute before you decide whatever the decision you're making. You want to get an epidural? Let me tell you, I said I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to get the epidural. Why? I don't know, because it seems like not getting the epidural is I'm vegan. My hair is natural. No epidural. I don't know why that doesn't even make sense. Let me tell you how in my mind that made sense, but when I said it out loud, it sounded foolish. By hour 15, I said, if someone does not bring me an epidural, I'm not even going to try no more. By hour 15, I couldn't have pushed anymore. With my first daughter, it was hour 25. In both instances, I got an epidural, but for some reason, there was something in my mind that said, you have to try. I didn't. I'm not having another baby, but if I were to, I would get it as soon as I go in the hospital.
Yeah, yes. And as Black women, we need to challenge ourselves to define what our badge of honor really is. And let it be your own personal badge of honor, right? Because it used to be you get a badge of honor for being strong, which meant enduring pain unnecessarily. So you decide what your badge of honor is. My badge of honor no longer is being the person that can work 2 jobs, take care of a full family, run 4 or 5 businesses. That no longer is my badge of honor. It used to be, but now that's just exhausting, right? So my badge of honor now is being able to just exist. Did I find space to exist today, where I didn't feel like I needed to prove anything, I needed to be anything, I needed to do anything more than what I'm doing right now?
I love that. I love that. Marge, you want to open it up for questions? I didn't even realize we have 550.
Oh, I didn't either. Sorry.
Yeah, no, that was it was good. It was good. I didn't want to interrupt the flow. So yes, people who are here, feel free to put your questions in the chat. I think we can get through them. We have 10 whole minutes. to talk about this some more. I guess while we wait for questions, Brittany, if you could like expand on, it was a couple of things. Like Jade, you mentioned like when you advocate for yourself, it makes people uncomfortable, and just like what the trouble or the challenge is with putting yourself first, especially like your mental health, right? Like, so if there are women who did choose to go through with an abortion because they were like, you know what, I'm not doing that postpartum thing again, or any other mental health related challenge, I'm just not trying to deal with it again. And this is the best decision for me. Like, why is that so challenging for us to make that type of decision?
I think it's primarily because we have always been told and taught as a complete society, not just Black women, that you, in order to be seen as good, you have to be humble and you have to put yourself last. And so, anytime we start putting ourselves first, it challenges that notion that you are not giving, you are not caring, you are not putting yourself last and being humble. So, that will always make people pause. um,
Mm,
you have to be intentional with yourself to put yourself first on the list. Like I say it everywhere I go, that you need to pour from your cup when it's running over. So that means you need to be pouring into yourself so much that people get the overflow. That's what I give
mhm.
people. I don't pour from a half empty cup. I'm only giving you what's flowing out of me because I'm overflowing. Because that's the only way I can show up and not feel exhausted at the end of the day. And so it always brings it up because it's taught to us in church. Like I feel like that's the first lesson I remember learning in church was about how Jesus gave his life for us. So therefore, if I want to be like Jesus, I got to give my life
Mm.
to the people around me too, which
Right.
means let me, let me not take any time for myself because how dare I?
Yeah, that's so true. That is so true. Please, ladies, do not be shy. If you have a question for me or Brittany or Marge, any of us, go ahead and put a question in the chat. You can Marge, you want people to come off of mute, or we're just doing questions?
If I think we have enough time and it's not that big of a group, so if you want to speak your question, we can do it that way too. Just take yourself off of mute and go for it.
This is if
I
no
have
one.
one here. I've got a question that came to me. It
Okay.
says, it's from Monica. Thanks, Monica, for asking your question. It says, what did you say anxiety plus what equals self sabotage? So I said anxiety plus depression typically equals self sabotage. But oftentimes it's also anxiety and past trauma can make you sabotage yourself. Really anything that's been put on you can cause you to start sabotaging yourself, because if we all think about what are the messages that get in our way, that make us get in our way, it's what I'm saying. Typically it comes from something from childhood or some type of potentially traumatic experience that has left a mark that's made you now make that the seed that got watered. So for me, it was always, well, my story's pretty interesting. So it was not good enough, and that came from my stepfather. But then I was very vocal as a child. I was an advocate, is what I would call myself now. But when I got pregnant, it all of the women in my life, unfortunately, gave me the message that my pregnancy was because I was too vocal. And so that
Mhm.
started to silence my voice. Because in my family, they didn't want us to have babies until we were married and older because they saw how it made their lives harder when each of my aunts and my grandmother had kids young.
Well, thank you for sharing that, and thank you for asking your question. Um, that was Monica, right? It-
Generational stuff will definitely get in the way and cause us to have postpartum because of those messages.
I think Marge always tells me, and I'm so grateful for her voice. She always says to me, "Your life could have been so different given the craziness that happens in your family."
I said that to
So
you today.
you did say that to me today, like given the trauma and the drama you could have been so different. And so I think all of us being here is showing that we want some type of change or some type of help, or we just want to maybe help others. My favorite thing to say is like, tell another Black woman because she may be suffering in silence. And so all of our voices give way to someone else using their voice. I'm looking at the time and I don't think there are any more questions. So I just want to right now plug next week is Black Maternal Health Week. Um, there's an epidemic in this country where Black women are not taken care of um, pre, peri, or postpartum. We're not taken care of. We die. We're 4 times more likely to die during childbirth. We're 4 times more likely to die in our postpartum stages. Our babies are 4 times more likely to die from 0 to 12 months. And so this is near and dear to us because we are here to take care of Black women, Black mothers specifically. And so we just want to offer you everything that we can virtually. At some point, we want to do that in person when the coronavirus finally decides to give us some space. But right now, we're coming to you all virtually. We have a pelvic floor class tomorrow. We have reclaiming our voice on, what is that, Wednesday, Marge? You want to go ahead and do it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Am I off mute? Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So here we go. Here's the rundown. Tomorrow is the pelvic floor class. I can hardly read this. Monday, if you're not already following us on Instagram, please do so. It's at She Matters. And so at She Matters.il. So very easy. And on Monday, we're doing an IG live with Regina. She's a doula, and she's Jade's personal doula. So they're going to talk about all things doula related and childbirth related. So you don't want to miss that. So that's at 6 p.m. on Monday. On Tuesday, we are doing Reclaiming Our Voices, advocacy to, through, and past childbirth. So this is pretty much directly correlated to the epidemic that Jade is talking about. How we navigate the healthcare system as Black women, terminology to use, how having a doula, how that helps advocate for you, to prevent you from dying. I hate that I had to say that like that, but that's what it is. And so that's Tuesday, April 13th, and Wednesday, April 14th at 7 p.m. We're doing in partnership with the Motherhood Center in Manhattan. This is going to be the White Allies event, how to help Black women in our fight for fair maternal care. So we're going to be talking with one of the founders of the Motherhood Center and really have a conversation about how your OBGYN, all your healthcare providers, if you have a therapist, anyone you go to who may not be Black, right? How they can advocate on your behalf and make sure that you're being treated fairly. Am I missing? I'm missing stuff. Okay, Thursday, we're launching our app
On Thursday.
So that's another getting out of your own way. Exactly. So that's going to be another IG live. I think Jade and myself, we're going to get on IG and we're going to walk you through the app, and the first 100 women to come onto the app, you get a bonus, you get a gift. So you don't want to miss out. And Friday, we're just going to round things out with a AMA with Jade on Instagram Live.
Thank you, Brittany. It is always, always, always great to be on with you. And I feel like this will not be the last time, of course. We will do something soon together. I appreciate you, love you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Everybody on the call, thank you. Please share Maternal Health Week with another Black woman. She may be suffering in silence. Have a good week, you guys, or weekend. What am I saying?
Yeah, it's Saturday. All right. Thanks, ladies, for joining so much.
Thank you.